from my fishing trip, refreshed and renewed and slightly less groomed than usual. More than you needed to know, but hey, we're friends, right? Anyway, I wiped my cluttered brain meats clean and sat down to write the script for this video. And then the clouds parted, and I got an invitation from Bane666AU to pop into his live open house hangout session. Holy shit, right? I didn't even try to play it cool. This was like, yeah! For me. See, I have all these things ferreting around in my head, but I don't have much opportunity in real life to talk about them. Not that I don't have friends, but there's a whole lot of this happening here in Canada when you bring up subjects like male suicide or sentencing gaps. It's part of why I started making videos. There just isn't an outlet here to discuss these things without running afoul of the dominant SJW narrative. Going into the hangout, I had no idea who else would be there, and I didn't even fucking care. Bane would be there, and I find him pretty trustworthy and measured. If you haven't watched his stuff, I'll link him. Anyway, it turned out to be a welcoming group, lots of good discussion, and I enjoyed my first hangout immensely, even though the whole time in my brain I was going, "Don't derp, bunny, don't derp, 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 derp." Ah, fuck, I derped. What can you do? But more to the point, the topic of financial motivation for ideology came up, with Dean Esme presenting a very firm viewpoint with references, and Bane probing through it with excellent moderation questions, and me, somewhere in the middle, quelle surprise. But you can watch the entire hangout yourself if you like, as I've linked it in the low bar. I'm an admitted cynic. I don't believe in altruism as it's usually presented. You can check out Price's theorem for a bit more on this. My observation is that people take actions and espouse beliefs that benefit them in some way. Sometimes that benefit is emotional, sometimes it's social, and sometimes it's tangible and financial. But I fall into this too. Every belief I hold, I can tell you exactly what my selfish payoff for it is. But back up. Rewind the shit truck. If you get a payoff for what you espouse, buddy, why are you anti-feminist? Why don't you want all the benefits feminism is pushing for you to have, like more lenient sentencing, pandering and gifts from men in courtship, more mental health and social program focus, preference in accusations of sexual abuse or rape, extra grants and bursaries and scholarships at school, affirmative action in hiring, until recently, freedom from the draft, unilateral power over abortion, and preference in family court proceedings? Why on earth am I speaking out against my own special treatment and being a protected class? Why would anyone in their right mind give up being a pretty, pretty princess? Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but it comes down to this tiny kernel of conscience, surrounded by a fluffy, fattening white cheddar mantle of pride. The conscience is because I get a reward, albeit it's just mental and emotional, but I get a reward by doing this kind of ephemeral sense of good when it does not benefit me directly. This is why I volunteer teach and clean up parks and nurse wounded wildlife back to health and give to fucking conservation areas to save endangered species that would probably eat me if given the opportunity. It's why I went into healthcare. Life sucks, and I sleep a little better at night even if I can only do one small thing a day that makes it suck a little less for someone or something else. But the pride part? It's because I don't view myself as a victim. I refuse to, and I'm not someone who constantly needs rescuing from the big bad world. And definitely not from the big bad men's. I don't need extra programs. I don't need special treatment or care and money above and beyond the basics. I say this as someone who has come from a position of incredible wealth and who has also found herself homeless with nothing. I can hang. We good, right? I can do for myself. But right now, I'm a protected class. Like one of the goddamn snakes I give money to preserve, except I'm not actually threatened. That's just insulting. And it's probably my ego talking, but when people treat me like I'm made of spun glass, I want to tear their throat out with my teeth and spit it back at them, just to prove the point. But back to the point of this video. In my recent hangout, the concept of ideology and how it is entwined, or not, with financial gain came up. I think it's a little too complex a structure to tackle in a facile way, so here we are. Bain asked, essentially, if financial gain was a foundation of ideology. At least that's how I interpreted it at the time, and I'm sure he'll spank me if I'm wrong. Bain spanks. Sorry, okay, anyway, where was I? Paper. Here I am. The short answer to whether financial incentive is necessary for an individual to hold a specific ideology is, drumroll please, no. People can believe what they like for their own reasons, and not all of those reasons can be directly linked to financial gain. However, and it's a big however, I assert that financial incentivization is a major component in how ideologies become entrenched and legitimized on a broader cultural scale. I argue that the more an ideology becomes normalized, the greater the financial aspects of incentivization and disincentivization become. That's a lot of wordy blah blah blah, so I done drawed a picture. So here is the circle of ideology and how it takes over a population. This is, of course, simply my own observations, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't inspired heavily by the underpants gnome model of success in business. But let's hold hands and skip around the merry-go-round together. And if by the end of this you don't think this scans, then tell me in the comments, please. This model can apply to almost any ideology that's gained traction in a given society. For the purposes of this, though, since in the hangout we were specifically discussing feminism, let's do feminism! The first stage of entrenched ideology is repetition. Gender equality has been a topic of discussion in many cultures over thousands of years. But since most people peg modern feminism as beginning with the women's suffrage movement in North America in 20s-ish, or before that a bit. And that's weird because Australia was actually ahead of the curve in this with the tailors' strike, but anyway, let's start there. The repetition, in this case, of the suffrage movement was simply the public rallying and sign-holding stuff, writing letters, flyering, raising awareness. So we move on to incentives and disincentives. Just raising awareness on itself can't work adequately. So then we had hunger strikes, which resulted in a big shit show of forced psychiatric care and force feeding. Ding, ding, ding. Now we have a game changer. Disincentivization. Because, men as a whole don't actually want to see women hurt. I know, right? So there's a ton of established standards of behavior that demonstrate men overall feel a certain compulsion to protect women in aggregate. So the disincentivization here is support my suffrage or I'll force you to hurt me by hurting myself. Like magic! 3 years after the hunger strikes, women are granted the vote in America. And the legislated vote to women is the last stage of formal entrenchment before the cycle ticks around again. Now, this first round of ideological ring around the rosy did not have an awful lot to do with financial gain on a large scale. But every time this process passes ideological go for another incarnation, the ideology becomes more refined. The financial gain becomes more evident. Ideologies never remain static when there is more to be gained. This is a really important aspect of this cycle. Every time an ideology gains a tangible formal win, it will expand its goals to the next tangible formal win. We go around again a few more times, with feminist goals continuing to change and expand, although it got slowed down a bit there due to those pesky horrors of war. Until we get to the civil rights movement of the 1960s and what is now considered second wave feminism. So, second wave feminism? Repetition. Same protests and rallies, but now there is a commercial interest. Feminist writers can now make money from their books. People begin to wear signals of their feminist support, like buttons and t-shirts. So the feminist cottage arts and crafts industry, as well as the literary industry, really begins to take off. Cha-ching! And so we go to incentivization and disincentivization. Well, there's of course still the tacit underpinning of give us what we want because we'll hurt ourselves if you don't. Now there's the added oldie but goodie disincentivization of withholding sex. It's no coincidence to me that the push to criminalize marital rape, which is a good thing, by the way, don't get me wrong, I just really would like to see the principle applied equally in practice to wives as well as husbands. But anyway, the push to criminalize marital rape coincided with this encouraging women to withhold sex from their husbands. Nothing's a coincidence, right? Now, speaking of the SNCC, most of the people in these second-wave feminist protests were students, particularly white women with financial resources. So academia became the compost pile for feminism to colonize. It was in universities' best financial interests not to alienate this new cash cow that, if nurtured, could continue to pay dividends for alumni generations to come. And thus, women's studies was born, although it would continue to change and twist with various permutations as time went on. So now, academia has a vested interest in promoting feminism. Cha-ching! And where academia goes, so goes politics and voting practices. So an extra cha-ching for whatever political party can begin really capitalizing on this new voter base. In this case, in America, the Democrats. And where political parties go, so will the media. Cha-ching again. So we go round a few more times with more repetition emerging in media of the feminist strong woman who don't need no man, female-centered casts, which means merchandising and advertising, and the financial gains of feminist ideology really start to become apparent and take center stage. We also see the introduction of queer feminist rhetoric, which, for a time, actively encouraged women to seek only lesbian relationships, regardless of the sexuality they identified with, as a political action of solidarity. Take one for the team. Munch that rug. Incentivization and disincentivization becomes more subtle at this point, but ultimately more pernicious. Support feminism because doing so gives more money to women's programs, even if doing so does not extend similar resources to men's issues of equal or greater relevance, such as shelters for abuse and university bursaries for men, especially white men. It compares and conflates feminism with advocacy for people of color. It favors women in custody battles while simultaneously calling for government financial support for single women with children. That's a double dip I'd like to see. Wouldn't you, if you could? And rewriting domestic violence laws to specifically name and favor women over men. Suddenly, even non-academic working-class women had a reason to adopt feminism. They would be insured of more often getting their way in family courts, would be given extra shrift in criminal sentencing due to systemic oppression, would be given extra accommodation in academics, including financial, and, using the reproductive rights argument, could unilaterally decide for men the fate of their offspring and the fate of the man's own bank account for almost 2 decades, even if paternity was not proven. Oh, and we've still got the give me what I want or I'll harm myself play on gynocentrism in the form of hunger strikes, and we still have the withhold sex until he does what you want advocacy. So progressive. Sorry, okay. Serious face. So, this incentivization leads to the current abortion laws, to the Violence Against Women Act, to the seeds of harassment legislation, affirmative action for women, and thousands of dollars in pay for the lobbyists, politicians, doctors, lawyers, professors, and deans who are willing to toe this line. And here we are today. The repetition and financial opportunism at this point is so obvious. Even looking at something as simple as Etsy, we can see over 16,000 items tagged feminist. And we have so-called victims of abuse, whose allegations were, by the way, disproven by due process, still managing to make personal bank off their claims. They're going to get paid one way or another. Because claiming victimhood is part of the industry of feminism. And let's just call it what it fucking is. What was once merely an ideology has now become an industry easily worth millions of dollars, employing a great many people in manufactured, female-focused organizations, mostly women, since men are apparently toxic. And you don't think that those for whom feminism is paying the bills will fight tooth and nail to keep that hamster in its wheel? If there isn't a way to turn that gender studies degree into bank, then by God, let's just make some. There's already a term for this. It's called professional fart catching. Because, let's what if for a sec. Okay. What if we as a society decided tomorrow that we were pretty up to date on rights under the law? Feminism is now irrelevant. What do you think these people are going to do? Do you think they're going to suddenly switch over to STEM? Take up a trade? Open a business? Or are they more likely to be in the line of half-calf mocha soy? What name can I write? Yeah. Incentivization and disincentivization have become so bloated that now catcalling is a criminal hate crime. Academics are censured for questioning feminism. The massive commercial movie and media industry now explicitly panders to a feminist audience, and even to the point of claiming misogyny as a factor in negative reviews. In the upcoming American election, Hillary Clinton is running a platform baldly based on the fact that she has lady parts and that there is a war on women. There are still very few havens for men who are victims of domestic abuse. They have to go to the general population of homeless shelters, which do not offer the same targeted care or counseling for their specific situation, while women have a much bigger piece of the pie. This despite the fact that domestic violence reports, even if taken in aggregate, still report that the disparity between female victims and male victims is maybe 10%. There is much more than a 10% difference in the resources allotted to female victims versus male victims. But feminism is about equality, right? And with respect to formal entrenchment and its roots in financial gain, in the modern expression of feminism, I just have one question. Why does Planned Parenthood, an organization with an explicitly feminist platform, have branches here in Canada, where reproductive health care for women is widespread and government funded by taxpayers? They offer nothing not already available under the generalized umbrella of our socialized medicine. Oh, well, maybe they offer one thing. They sell feminism. Cha-ching. So getting back to the merry-go-round of building an ideology, every time this cycle is fulfilled, formal entrenchment, it's like a layer of brick. Round and round, each incarnation and refinement, another layer, higher and higher, with each cycle becoming more entrenched and more financially incentivized, until a century passes, And the feminist Rapunzels have their beautiful shining tower. And just like the tower in the original fairy tale, this tower not only effectively keeps their adversaries out, in this case, the dastardly villains of critical thinking, equality of opportunity, the ability to challenge legislation that makes women a protected and pampered class, and evolution of merit not based on your pudenda. Bum, bum, bum. But it keeps the Rapunzels warm and safe and isolated in their damseled echo chamber. I hear they have puppies up there and Play-Doh. Are you ready to take the tower down? Because as much as I think the roots and origins of feminism, that tired old pony of a dictionary definition dragged out time and time again, had merit, the tower is simply too big now. It needs to be torn down. Feminism, as it has mutated and spread like a parasitic colony, cannot be saved. It can't just be given a fresh coat of paint. There are simply too many influential commercial organizations, and I include the government in that, especially mine here in Canada. They have too much skin in the game, invested in keeping this ideology active, enforced, and ever expanding. And so, shitlords like me try to dismantle it one brick at a time, one video at a time, one tweet at a time, one vote at a time, one letter to our politicians and lawmakers at a time. Then, maybe, we can get to something resembling gender harmony, with fewer women clinging to the idea that every man is chock full of rapey, toxic masculinity just waiting to prey upon them, and fewer men growing up surrounded by accusatory fingers as second-class citizens under the law. But don't for 1 second fool yourself that feminism has anything to do with moral virtue or egalitarianism anymore. It may have started out that way, but now it's all about the money, honey.